camp, about you should do it. And he says when you go out, when you walk out of the business, you don't have the heter. It's not like it's hutra. It's a hutra legamri. When you go out, you come whenever you can. To come and go, he says you should put on a yarmulke. And also, it seems from the Ramesh's lashon, you could look it up. He's talking about someone who doesn't have a job. He needs a job. But let's say someone has a job and he's making enough to live. And he'd like to get a better job and make more money. So if you look at Rav Moshe's lashon, he's not mad at that. Rav Moshe says, "L'tzarchei parnasa." He compares it to someone who's losing a chaimish minachasav or shlish minachasav. He's not going to have a job at all, so he's matir. What about someone who has a job? He has a job, so he's making $50,000 a year. Now he wants to get a better job. But Rav Moshe doesn't say specifically, but it seems from the Igros Moshe that it's awesome. Because he's only matir based on the fact that you don't have a job otherwise. So what do we do? So I'll tell you the yetzer that I tell people, and I would tell this to people lechatchila, who are even looking in the first place for a job, and the only job they can have is without a yarmulke. The yetzer that I would suggest is very simple. To get yourself a toupee. To get yourself a small toupee. Now, you'll ask, how can a man put on a lady's wig? You don't have to get a lady's wig. You go and you get yourself a yarmulke size toupee and you put it, you screw it on before you go to work in the morning, and you go to work. And and if you think it's not done, it's done. I once had the unique experience of a chavrusa who was going out to work, and we were still learning. And one day he told me I have to leave early. I have an appointment by the sheitel macher, and you have to leave early because it can be done. Now you have to remember for a minute. If you're going to work and you're going to go without a yarmulke, which shita are you relying on? You're relying on the marshal shita anyway, that it's only asmidas chasidus. That's the shita you're relying on. According to the marshal, the other nafkamina was wearing a toupee. So l'maisa, according to the shita marshal, if you're going to rely on a shita anyway, so you're not an onus. So for you, you can be yitzer with wearing a small. Now don't think again, it means a big sheitel. People look at me like I'm crazy when I tell them this. But it means they can make a yarmulke size a piece of sheitel, and you put it on, and you can't tell. Guys have worn it into yeshiva with the yarmulke on top too, but people can't tell. It doesn't have to be human hair. It doesn't have to cost so much, but it can look nice. Now, this is really a good eitzah. I should mention, people ask about the size of a yarmulke. I've noticed by a good friend of mine that I know that he's makbid on the size. It should be at least as big as the bull spot right underneath. It gets bigger as time goes on. I noticed more laughing from upstairs than from downstairs on that one. But Rabbi Ovadia Yosef writes, Ramesha writes in the Tshuva that there's no shear. What's a shear for yarmulke? There's no shear. Doesn't even list a shear for yarmulke. Rabbi Ovadia Yosef writes, the shear of a yarmulke is that you should look like a frumiyid. That if someone looks at you from the front or from the side, the kol tzedadav, they should see that you're a frum person. He says that's the shear that a yarmulke should be. That a person who goes should look like a frumiyid. So now you're going to ask me, I'm telling people to go and wear a toupee. So you're not going to look like a frumiyid. What kind of eitz is it? The shear of a yarmulke is to look like a frumiyid. So why does it help? So the truth is that you're right. Going and you're not going to look like a frumiyid. But I must tell you a yesayid, and this is a yesayid b'chlal about wearing a yarmulke. And this is why somehow subconsciously society has made class differences. I remember when I was 14 years old, I went to Eretz Yisrael with a camp. And we were in the airport, and there were, 40, 50, I don't remember how many boys milling around. And there were some people who had obviously never seen Fruma Yidden were sitting there and watching us. And this lady called me over, and she asked me, they were sitting watching us for a little while. She said they were trying to figure out the different color yarmulkes and size yarmulkes, how we assess them to different people. If it's by age order, or by height order, or by payas size order. So she asked me for the formula, how we assess them. So I explained to her that it's a matter of personal choice. But who looks the most at your yarmulke? Who looks the most at the way you look with whatever style yarmulke you happen to wear? You. You, more than anyone else, notice the way you look. And it's that way with begadim bichlal. Any clothing you wear, who notices it the most? You put on a new suit, you put on a new hat, you put on a new tie. You look in the mirror to see how it looks. Most people don't notice it. Most people have no idea. You know, it's like the time my wife came home with a new sheitel, and she wore it as a regular day. I didn't notice it. I got in trouble later. But I didn't notice that was a different sheitel. How should I notice? But the person wearing it is thinking, oh, what's he thinking now? You know, is he thinking, does he like it? Doesn't he like it? Who notices? Most of all, you notice. The Sefer HaChinuch in Mitzvah Tzadik Tes writes, what's Mitzvah Tzadik Tes? It's the mitzvah of Big Day Kahuna, of wearing the begadim that the Kohen has to wear when he's in the Beis HaMikdash. What is the Tam HaMitzvah of Big Day Kahuna? So most people would think about it. I think most people would say, it's a nice kavod. It's the proper way the Beis HaMikdash should look, is that all the people there wear a similar uniform, are dressed similarly in a nice way. Zok Chinuch, milvad tam zeh, besides this reason, which he says is true. He says the Shoirish HaMitzvah is a totally different reason. And he writes, Hayesoid kavu alanu, ki ha'adam nifal kafi pu'ulase. It's Yesoid that the Chinuch writes in many places, that a person is influenced by what he does. What you do, that influences you. Your feelings are a result of your actions. More than your actions, a result of your feelings. Every Baal Tshuva knows that if they're going to wait to put on tefillin until they feel it, they'll never get there. But if they jump in and put on tefillin, then the feelings come from, with the Maisa come the feelings. So says the Chinuch, Adam nifal kfi pu'ulasai, v'achareya machshavoisa v'kavinoisa. And your thoughts go based on the way you, based as a result of what you do. Uminatam hazeh nemar, he says from this reason was said the Big Day Kahuna. And v'hamitz nefes, he talks specifically about a hat that the Kohen wore. Orka, now listen to a yarmulke. The hat of a Kohen was Orka Sheish Esrei Amma, 16 amis long, 32 feet long. All right, that's the Chafetz Chaim shir. That's the Chazanish shir rather. I don't know if the Kohen Gadol held a Chazanish shir. But even if you hold a smaller shir, so it was 24, 25 feet long. Umakifa v'raishai, and he would wind it around his head. Kidei sheyira isai b'chalei sheisai, and a boy, he felt it every time he picked up his head. He felt something on his head. Adam nifal kfi pu'ulasei. According to what a person wears, the person ends up behaving differently. We know that. It's no chidush. But we don't realize it. We always say, what's the difference what people wear? What's the difference what you wear? It matters what's inside. Of course it matters what's inside. But what you wear has to do with the way you look at yourself. And if the idea of a yarmulke is you should look like a yid, avada, you should look like a yid to others. But first and foremost, to yourself. To yourself. You should look like a frum yid. Now it sounds so far-fetched to wear it, to pay, to work. And that the Ramesh needs my askama. But that this type of thing is an haga, which people have to have a certain feeling in wearing a yarmulke. It's not the piece of cloth, it's the feeling that comes with it. But it answers a tremendous kasha. If the reason we wear yarmulkes is because we're supposed to feel Yirah Shamayim, why is it that women don't wear yarmulkes? Except the conservative women by the Kaisel. But why is it that women don't wear yarmulkes? Why not? If the reason you're wearing a yarmulke is out to Yirah Shamayim, there's a difference between men and women in Yirah Shamayim, the inyanim of Yirah Shamayim. But the answer is that this is something which started as a hanhaga and was accepted by people. Lamaisa, most women, married women, they cover their heads anyway. They cover their hair anyhow. So, the Mela, the hanhaga developed this way. Ramesh is saying that it developed as a chiyuv. If it developed as a chiyuv, then we can understand it. There's some cipher in his Pirush on the Dorim Daf Lamed. The Ben Ish Chai and the Ben Yehoda and Shabbos Kuf Yud Ches go into reasons why, to try to explain why women never started wearing yarmulkes. The Ben Ish Chai is very interesting. He says that has to do with shadim. Anybody ever thought of not wearing a yarmulke? He explains what shadim do to people when they don't have yarmulkes on. But he says they don't do it. They don't start up with women, only with men. So he says that's why the men have to do it. But anyway, according to Ramesh's explanation, it's understandable. Rabbi Ovadia Yosef in the Yechavet Das Chelik Dalit Tshuva Aleph says that even if the Iker is not like the Taz, but today, because the yarmulke has become a symbol of a Fruma Yid, it's become such a symbol, Yidden have made symbols out of symbols. The Rebbe became not only a symbol out of Fruma Yidden, but a symbol of which Yidden are this kind of Frum and that kind of Frum, more Frum and less Frum, and this style Frum and that style Frum. There are all kinds of styles already. So where did that come? That already, the yarmulke has become, such Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, a strict obligation on Yidden. The interesting, people want to know what Kippas Ruga. Yaitze yarmulke with Kippas Ruga. It's Beferish in Shulchan Aruch. In Siman Tzadik Aleph in Shulchan Aruch, it talks about wearing a woven yarmulke. It talks about a woven yarmulke made out of straw, and it says that it's good. It's interesting. Some Seifa has a tshuva in the Likutim in Chelik Vav. I think it's the second or third tshuva about people who made a yarmulke that was so kippas rugadik, so woven that their hair stuck up in between the weaving. And he has a shayla that has to be aymin merub ala paris or paris merub ala aymin, and he says that yarmulke is also good. He says aymin merub ala paris doesn't have to do with the yarmulkes. A yarmulke is good. The yarmulke, of course, is what the person makes out of the yarmulke, what the person feels out of the yarmulke, which is why it's there. It's interesting, as an aside, that many people assume that when they eat, they have to have a yarmulke.